Okay.
Fab.
So sorry about that, but feel free to start presenting now.
No worries. So I'm just going to start with the project launching in October. We started with workshop planning and also making a survey to put out in November as a call to action for people to take part in the workshops and also tell us about their favorite streets, describe them in 3 words, and why they may make route diversions. So we chose to use a survey as a jumping off point to connect with some of the members of the community and to kind of help gauge the interest that people had in what we were planning. And our aim was to like encourage people to join the walkabouts and also to start gathering initial insights or data onto the on the places that people enjoy and how they would describe them. So the actual walkabout workshops took place from December to March, and the 2 initial ones were at Gos Hill Studios to kind of test out our methodology. We designed a 3-hour workshop where we would ask people questions surrounding safety, social and physical activeness and belonging. And then we would ask them to map out the routes and to highlight like places of interest, places that they like, dislike, places that they may avoid, and like how they feel when they're making these journeys. So this was like a pen to paper kind of element of it. And then we then went out in the field to take a walk to experience in real time and incorporate like some activity, some physical activity. So from March onwards, we then had our synthesis. So this is when we just looked at all the information that we had gathered and organized and categorized them into themes. And this helped us to like draw out needs or frustrations from women and girls in the area. So a bit more on synthesis. So the yellow circle kind of shows a screenshot of the transcription of notes from each session. We were able to point out or pull out some common threads in these responses, and then they contributed to a theme, which then contributed to a category or topic in the place review, which we'll go on to talk about later. The bottom maps are like outputs where we transferred the post-its or like the notes onto actual actual places on the map. So for example, on the right hand side, which you can't see, but for example, if someone made a comment about White City, which is a retail park for those who aren't familiar with the area, we would plot White City like the post-it and then also add the comment, which would be, it could have been better designed for all residents to have access to the area. It's not very accessible to get to for everyone, somewhat of a divide for people who walk. So choosing to present the responses in this way was just to give a taster of how the map or an online map may look, and also to provide reference for the areas that come up frequently, which can be shown on the left. So this street here, for example, was mentioned maybe 3 times and then has 3 different comments surrounding it. So moving on to some of the themes that we were able to uncover from the sessions. We found that some of the themes from the sessions and the survey responses also overlapped. So the same things were coming up, things like vehicle behaviour, cars parking on the street, like limiting your access to the pavement, or poor lighting, or it being dark in the park, green spaces, things like street design or upkeep. So that ranged from like not enough or poor drop curbs or the actual placement of pavement slabs, and community. Through the synthesis sessions, we were also able to develop some profiles or personas to kind of represent the kind of people that we engaged with, some of their behaviors, their frustrations, and their needs. So these profiles or personas are not an exhaustive representation of the whole of Trafford, but more of a snapshot of the people the people who participated in this part of the project at this time. So here you can see is an example. This is someone who feels safe at their local community centre as they know that there are events for them, and they feel like there should be more funding in the area for different people, not just for matches or gigs. I will just say this was done in North Trafford, where they have the Man United Stadium and the cricket ground, which are used like for sports and other like entertainment activities. And this person feels safe because she knows that when she's with people. And then we just have these quotes, which are direct quotes from conversations that we've had. They're like not made up. And it just reads that the presence of community centres makes you feel wanted in the area and they are open to everyone. The illustrations were done by a project partner, Publica, who will be talking about their work next week. So at this point, I am going to pass on to Priska.
Yes, we're just gonna have a little bit of a moment to kind of take in, because there's a lot of information that's been just shared and a lot more to come as well. So just a little break to share some thoughts or reflections if you have any, anything you might have seen before, anything you might have done before.
I'm interested in the size of groups that you're walking around with, because I can imagine it would get a bit complicated. Sorry, I've just realised that Paul put his hand up and I just randomly started talking.
That's okay.
The size of group for each session varied. Sometimes it would be a small group of maybe to two. I think the smallest was 2 participants, and then it'll either be, and then me and Priska included, that's 4 of us walking around. I think the most we had at one session was 8 to 10, I think. And yeah, we wouldn't, I'd say maybe people would kind of pair off, but we would be walking like behind each other, because sometimes we might stop and walk to speak about things, whilst others might carry on and stop at a place.
And also we had 14 different workshops as well.
That sounds good.
Oh, sorry. Was that all?
Yeah, thank you. That's cool.
Paul, feel free.
So could you just go back a couple of slides, please, if you don't mind? Because there was a question I wanted to ask, but I forgot about. Yeah, so forward one again. What was it around media messaging in particular? Was it people giving out messages or messages that were in the media?
At the time, there was a case, sorry, I can't remember all the details around it, with someone going missing on the canal in an area. And it was things like, okay, when these things do happen, when violence against women and girls or harassment is put on the media, the messaging to that is that you should stay at home, you should avoid canals, you shouldn't go to the park at a certain time. And although this doesn't happen, it hasn't been a direct experience of you, it still like creates this fear, and then you do avoid these things, but off the basis of like not your actual experience. So that was where that media messaging
I'll focus on, you know, people being more respectful and safer to each other. It's like you stay out of the, you're the problem. So yeah, okay. Sorry, can you go back 2 slides, please, as well? I'll just put one more question. Okay, so the you said about you drew the themes together, and then you talked about like when you had that photograph of all the different notes. So yeah, that one, you go from the top down. So is that like a thematic analysis of stuff that you got in the conversations, or?
What the actual picture is just literally the yellow were things that were spoken about when we were talking about, do you feel safe or unsafe on your area, or what makes you feel safe or unsafe? The pink is in regards to a feeling of belonging, and the green is active. So it is just the raw transcription here.
Okay.
But yeah, like you said, it is like thematic analysis.
Yeah.
So in the sense that you kind of just group all the affinity map, like group all the similar things into one.
Great, thank you.
Did other people have their hand up? They might have gone down. No?
Have we got any other reflections? Any other questions? Okay, then Toba, feel free to continue your presentation.
Okay, so currently we are in the last stages of developing a place review, which is a tool that is usually used to assess how well a site is performing or to identify what the needs are. And this place review development has been really centered on using the language and the themes discussed in the sessions. And yeah, and then the next piece of work would be to develop an online map that will collate all this information and gather it so that people can see and even relate to the experience of women and girls in this area. So there'll be like layers of information, and it will include additional information like the presence of barrel bikes or where activities are taking place, activities that have been funded by like the community grant part of this project. So more on our place review development. So we started by looking at, after we've got like these themes and like the language of how people describe stuff, we started looking at existing place review or audits, as some people might know, refer to them, to see like what is already out there and what works. And we were drawn to one in particular called the Universal Design Walkability Audit Tool, because we found like the categories, some of the categories at least, did overlap with what the themes that we had pulled out. So we kind of uploaded the content onto Google Maps, Google Docs, and developed it further into a booklet on Canva. So on the left, you can see the Google and the Canva. And we had feedback sessions with the wider project group, with project partners, and with our team at Open Data Manchester. And then the next step involved testing the place review with people to see how they found it. So far with the usability testing, we've done an in-person one and an online one. And our main goals with this testing was to find out how usable the review is, what feelings were elicited, if any, when carrying out the review. We wanted to know if the content was sufficient and appropriate. And then we also wanted to gauge like kind of legacy aspects of the review and to see how or if people would use it like outside of this project. So the slides, this slide shows on the left, there's just the comments that we received during the testing and feedback sessions. Yeah, just different things. We did kind of, this is an example of us grouping them based on what they were about. So comments about language or just thought or reflection, comments about feelings. On the right, it's just like a zoomed in version of the easily actionable things. So we did want to keep it within the scope of the project and what we can do. So we picked out things like, for example, there was a category called look and feel, but through the testing, it was found that feel wasn't quite the right word for the content of that category. So it was there you can see it says look and cleanliness, which we did change it to. And things like adding more room for explanation or space for explanation or giving prompts and things. So as you can see, there's little ticks that we've done as we like kind of incorporated them into the place review, which now looks like this. So the tool now includes exercises for individuals or groups to kind of identify their role in the effort to improve the areas that they live in. And it can either be like things like starting initiatives or advocating for change with local councils. And then there's also like a space for reflection and also exploration of the local area as well. So just added a bit more activities to kind of cater to like the needs of the people who live there and what they found interesting. So I'm just going to talk a bit more about the online map, which is currently under construction. But just wanted to include like a visualization of what it will look like. So earlier I did show the sides of the two maps on Miro, or the kind of two outputs, but the goal is to have them transferred onto this online map so that people can see them and actually interact with them. So there'll be like various layers. We'll be able to input the maps like using this map layer tool where we kind of just add routes, but we'll also be able to add comments and things like that. And then the public will be able to engage with it by like zooming in and zooming out, but they'll also be able to search for like a name place or a postcode, and hopefully like they might be able to, well, they should be able to search for, if they put things like barrel bike, as I mentioned before, all the barrel bikes in the area should kind of like pop up. So we're really hoping that there'll be lots of layers so that different people can engage with it in different ways. And also like see the experience of the women and girls that we have spoken to so far. Okay, so this next is us kind of reflecting on the challenges that we had whilst doing this work. And one of the challenges that we faced during the workshop kind of phase was engagement. As for some sessions, we had like no participants. So we kind of had to adapt the sessions to be drop-ins to increase this participation. So it was us going out to ask people who were in the venues of the workshop that we had planned, but they hadn't actually signed up to do like a walkabout workshop. We would ask if they had the time to talk about the topics of safety, activeness, and belonging. And then to overcome weather and mobility constraints, we focused, again, moved the focus of sessions to having conversations and not actually going out or doing like paper maps from like recall rather than the like in real time experience. And then we also had like this kind of gripe with demographic data collection in that we were already struggling with participation and engagement, and we felt like asking participants to disclose personal information might have pushed them away even further. So instead, we just decided to speak to a wide variety of people by engaging with different community spaces. So this could be a community centre, a college, or different kind of like community groups or different centres for like different things. And we found like by doing this, participants would just volunteer like personal information without being asked to do so. So it kind of like created a kind of a genuine environment for people to just talk and reveal how much or how little that they wanted. So with these reflections and challenges, we had some like kind of takeaways or kind of key learnings. Our main learning from this was around engagement and the recruitment of participants. And we learned that we need to really appreciate the nuance in people's lives. And although you might have a good idea or be like involved in a good project about an important aspect of people's lives, it might not still get the traction because of people's multi-layered experience. So with this, I mean, we have like the cost of living crisis and housing crisis and all these things going on, which are on the top of people's like priority list. So although something like safety is important to people, it gets pushed down. And so, yeah, it's just nuance. Like people might have these experiences but not engage with them even because there's other things going on. And like ways that you can address this might be by engaging people through their trusted channels, whether this be community centres, schools, or local authorities. So this kind of links with the idea of meeting people where they are, rather than expecting them to come to you and to help what you're doing. Like just going out, speaking to people where they would normally be, speaking about what they're doing, and letting them speak, even if it's like off topic of what you want to hear as well. And we found that being approachable in our approach, being adaptable in our approach was a really good way to work, because that meant like we were able to keep on moving forward and still progress with the work and just tailor it to the people that you're speaking to, the people that you want to work with. And then the last kind of takeaway is that you need to give more value to the people taking part in your work. So kind of, it does help with the engagement and the kind of participation. So adding value can come from like paying people if they take part in things. So like for like longer workshops and things, but even when having conversations, it goes back to like meeting people where they are and not kind of stopping the conversation when you feel like you've got the information that you've wanted, or like, oh, you've heard what you wanted to hear, which also links to like not working based off of assumptions and taking in active listening, taking in everything that people have said and then going back to look at it, because there's always going to be things that you pull out that's going to be like, oh, that is like so related to this thing that I didn't realize before. So yes, that is the work that we've done and where we're up to and what we're going to be doing. I'm going to pass on to Priska. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Thank you, Toba, for this presentation. It's really thorough, so a round of applause. Now we're going to have a little bit of time for a discussion, but before we go into the question prompts that we have, I wanted to ask if there are any any other questions that you have about Toyabot's presentation, our work, and our methods. Caroline?
Hi. Yeah, that was really interesting. I'm glad it's like the first session of 6, so sort of get in at the beginning. Just a couple of things that resonated, sort of coming from retail background, that the whole engagement thing, that was really interesting. So even when, you know, you kind of entice people to come along, say, oh, you'll get a voucher or you'll get this, it's so hard to get people to come to a place and talk about something that isn't necessarily at the top of their list, and actually changing what you're doing and going out to them and in places that perhaps they're more trusting was a really good sort of change of tactic. That was really interesting. And I just got a question. Would you mind going back to the very beginning with the objectives? Because I understand the sort of the where you are now, but I just want to revisit the original plan, because I can't remember. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm also struggling to go back. Give me a second.
Sorry.
That's right. Are you talking about the whole project?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, it's taking so
Apologies if I'm the only one who can't remember.
It's okay. I don't have a very good memory, so that's not a problem.
I'm just going to stop sharing for a second to go back to the beginning. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Are you talking about this slide?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think it's going back to what is going to come out of it and what the plans are. So
Come out of what, sorry?
So what you're expecting to get out of the whole project and sort of what the next steps are. That's
Okay.
what my question is.
Sorry, yeah. So like the work that we have done began from October when the project launched, and was initially to kind of find out from the community what they think and their perceptions of their area, because like we find that normally with work that's done, people come in, they make assumptions and then feed this into people who make decisions, and then it ends up being like a kind of disconnect or dissonance between what is actually happening and what people looking into a place think is happening. So we wanted to kind of engage the people who this work would affect, or who like decision making normally affects, to see how they describe, and this focusing on language, like what words do they use, because sometimes like the things that you think you say aren't, or the words that people attribute to a place aren't the right words, or they don't have like a relevance for the people who are living there. So this kind of work would then inform other project partners in the work that they're doing. So with Greater Sport, they're doing like organized walks. There's been like a division of games and things that should work in the area or be tailored to the area and things like that. So the whole project is quite vast in that there's multiple partners and they're all doing like different parts of work. There's like a campaign going on at the minute, and there is bystander training. But then this part of the work was kind of to inform that and to make sure that the people in the area weren't neglected in the work.
Thank you very much for that.
Have you got any other questions, Caroline? Okay, so Tom, you have your hand raised.
Thanks. It was particularly around engagement. I'm involved in housing, social housing for Wigan Council, and it's one of the problems that we face is trying to engage with people and trying to find it. I guess it's gaining their trust, and I quite like the idea of going to them rather than them coming to you, but also this idea of reward, because people's time is valuable. So it's quite interesting finding that, and it's then, I guess, the problem that goes with that is getting the demographics right as well. That, you know, that you don't want to hear the same voices time after time. how do we approach that? How do we find a way of in the first place, but then encouraging maybe the silence to come through? And it's how do we listen to the silence? Bit of a strange question, but I think I know what I mean.
I think I know what you mean too. It's like, I think it's just like speaking to as many people as you can. And I guess if all the people you've spoken to have the same voice, but are different, maybe you can find like some solace in that. Okay, this is a real need then, because all these different people are saying the same thing. It's like getting the balance right of like your demographic diversity and also like the diversity in what you're hearing and what you're receiving. But I guess if everyone is saying the same thing, you can move forward with that. And then also just acknowledging the possibility that we didn't speak to every single person. We spoke to this amount of people and this is what we found. I think leaving the kind of opportunity for other people to be like, well, I don't agree, or that's fine, but this is like from who we spoke. This is from the sample that we've done at this time. I hope that's helpful.
I just wanted to add that the key really is trust. And so some people might be silent when speaking to someone, but then be really chatty if they're speaking to someone that they have confidence in and they trust. So it's really about making sure that you create these relationships through places and people that they do trust, so that they know that, and also being ethical with the work that you're doing, so that they know that the work you're doing is ethical and they won't be put in a disadvantageous, is that word, place by engaging with you. You got any other questions? No? John?
Thank you. It's completely gone out my brain. Yes, words. Could you speak a bit more about the testing approach that you took? Because you kind of working from a place audit model. Who did you approach for that testing? Was it a similar kind of workshop where you went into the community could you just talk about that process and how you chose people, how they responded? Because that's really important to the work that Paul and I do, is understanding what words we use in our surveys and in our questions to get the widest community of all kinds of demographics to understand and relate to us.
Okay. So alongside with the work that we've been doing, there's been like a recruitment of art groups or creative groups in the area to do some kind of installation or activity which can kind of increase or like promote more joyful experiences in the area. So we actually got in touch with the groups who like won that kind of funding, because we thought that initially we could do a kind of before and after comparison of like a location that they had picked of where they're going to do their activity. And then choosing these groups as well, they themselves are in the community or in the area, they live there, they work there, and then they engage with all different types of people. So we kind of used their knowledge, or their knowledge kind of contributed into, oh, like people won't know this word, like, or give an example of what this means. So that's how, that's who we've done the testing with so far. And then those groups are also different. Like one of them works with like younger kids up to maybe 25, so quite varied even. And then the other do like other types of like artwork. So there's some diversity within the arts or creative people that we kind of use, but we do want to do more testing with residents as well to see more testing, or actually more like place reviews to see how that goes with them, because like although we're at the end of the development stage, it's like an agile process where if something is flagged up, it can be reiterated and like improved further. But yeah, sorry, what was the back end about the work that you're doing and how?
I mean, you've covered it, because you were talking about the kind of words that local people might use. I live in York, but I do work in Liverpool, and so there's different colloquial terms and stuff that I wouldn't understand. I wouldn't know what people mean about how they talk about their places. Whereas Paul's in the team, he's from the Liverpool area, so he understands all that. But it's just about getting that reflection from the community before you then send out a survey to thousands of people or whoever it might be. So yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, you also have your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, I feel like you're just getting a grilling off the strands at the moment. So yeah, go to where people are. Like we're really trying to design this stuff at the moment. As an organization, you know, we try and work in the places where we've got the biggest impact, which tends to be areas that are a lot more racially diverse than we are as an organization. So, you know, I think he's talking about having someone who speaks to people in their local area who's in a position of trust. You know, we've worked in the past and trying to get information out of like Somali communities, Roma communities and stuff like that. How do you do that? Did you sort of outsource that to local organizations, did you say, or did you sort of have people working there for a long time before they started to try and get information to build that trust?
It's funny because when you're speaking, I was like, yeah, outsource. That's like, I think that's one of the good ways to do is that you kind of connect with someone who's already in that kind of position or community and use as a bridge. But we were really lucky in that when we did go to these community centers, like we made friends with people who were working there also. So like so then like when someone sees you speaking to someone that they know, that mutuality or mutual, yeah, I think it's mutuality, already creates like a more relaxed and more equal footing, I think, rather than someone coming in and like asking you all these questions. Yeah, I think it's in like telling people what you're doing, finding out what they're doing, like showing an interest in their lives as well, kind of helps to create or break down the barriers of people like talking to you and like giving information. What was another thing, Priska?
I was going to mention, yes, really working with the people that already work in these places and the faces that the community members see every day. And if those people, the people that work there, are on board with the project you're doing, they will also be quite enthusiastic supporters of it and talk about it with the community as a whole. So it will create a little bit of a network of people that already know what you're doing, kind of know what they'd be getting into. So they are more likely to join if you create a workshop, because they know that the people that they trust you, but also they already know kind of what they'd be getting into, and that makes them feel a lot safer.
Amazing.
And also like creating opportunities for people to leave or like, you know,
Yeah.
you don't have to answer the question. It's okay if you can't answer it, and things like prompts like that. It just again breaks down the kind of imbalance that there might be.
Right. So you talk about like letting people speak off topic. We've been doing some research around how we do community engagement within Sus Trans, and it is very important to do that, but we're trying to find our way to make it not like performative. You know, we're not like, oh yeah, you've told us about dog mess and bins, but actually they're council problems. They're not, you know, they're not transport. So we don't do anything with that. What do we do with that data? We don't want people giving us all this information and opening their souls to us almost, and then it just goes in a bag somewhere. So like, you know, next time someone comes to engage, then they're like, well, what's the point in having this conversation? Because you listen to everything, but you only took what you wanted out of it.
Yeah.
How do you feed that back? And, you know, when you do an engagement, how do you give that feedback to the people who give you that information in the first place at the end of a project?
I think it's managing expectations at the beginning, because at the end of the day, we're all individual people, and it's like, I don't actually work for the council, I don't work for the government, or if I did, I don't have the position where I can make major decisions. Like, this is also my work, but I'm just trying to facilitate like good things. And I think when people realize that as well, it takes the pressure off of you, and it doesn't create create this hope like, oh, I told her all these things, they're going to be fixed. But then also trying to create or get involved in channels or like create relationships with other people who do work so that you can pass on that information. So even if it's like, oh, we didn't do everything you said, but what you told us we passed on to like the relevant channels, and like just being honest. Like, I don't know how far it will go, but the fact that you said something, hopefully more people can say something and that will gain traction. So I think it's like, yeah, managing expectations and being honest. I think like typically like when people are kind of on this front of speaking, so sometimes they don't mind if it doesn't go forward, but because you've let them like not be an outlet, but because you've let them like air it out, that's also like something that's valuable to them as well. So yeah, those are my top tips.
Cool. Thank you.
Caroline?
Yeah, just from my experience very quickly, I agree with everything that you've been saying, because I help out on a music education, and to get a grant, we have to meet certain criteria. And when we first looked at it, you sort of think, oh yeah, I've got to do this, you know, tick boxing. But when you get into it, you think actually that's really important. And one of the things we were failing on was youth voice, which is absolutely critical, because if you're doing music education, surely you've got to ask the people that are getting the music or are not getting the music, more importantly. So and looking back now, we didn't do it very well. So we kind of thought, okay, so we need to go and ask some people. Who do we ask? How do we engage with them? And we've learned a lot since, you know, how not to do it. So, and one of the problems we had was they weren't comfortable coming to the, you know, like the Zoom meeting and talking about what they thought. They wanted to have someone to feed it through, and then that, you know, that all those things, they wanted to know what would happen, and what would happen if they were ignored, or they came up with all these ideas. So we had to come up with some kind of framework. So I wish we could kind of turn the clock back and, you know, done it a bit better and perhaps sought some professional advice on it. But we did learn an awful lot about how not to do it. So yeah, just thought I'd share that. But it's very interesting hearing yeah, those challenges in the project. So
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's good to
Oh,
have challenges
sorry, my bad.
and to know like what you didn't do the best, because like when or if you have to do it again next time, it's, you know, you're already halfway through. You already know what's going to be done. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. We got any more questions? Or I have a couple of questions that I can throw to you instead this time.
So I've got a couple of quick, very short
ahead.
ones. I don't want to take over the whole session, but I've got a list. So in terms of payment, it's another thing that we've been battling with. We don't do 0 hours contracts, but we really want to try and, you know, be a bit of a gateway drug towards working in Sustrans, or, you know, we want people delivering the projects for us in areas. How do you do that in terms of you know, getting people on board and, you know, paying them or reimbursing them for their time? And is there any way that you sort of safeguard your data to show that when you got these outcomes, you're not getting them because you're paid for them?
I think one of the initial things is that people don't have to accept the payment, so or reimbursement or voucher. So it's offering it first. You don't have to accept it, but we would like to reimburse you for your time. And then doing some research just to make sure, like for some people, if they're on benefits, like accepting payments. I don't think cash in hand that you're like, you shouldn't do that or are allowed to do that anyway, kind of thing. What was the other thing? If you're doing like a kind of gateway thing, I don't know, maybe I don't know if you might have already done this, but setting up a volunteering thing, and then or finding out what they want to get out of like taking part as well. So that if you can't do the like monetary payment, what other value can they receive, or do they want to receive? And it's definitely something that has to be posed to them, or like an individual person, because it might be different for a lot of people. Some people might just want like their transport paid for and it's fine. In terms of the data as well, and kind of, I think when you're working with people, you kind of you will know or get like this feeling when someone's doing something just to be paid. But I don't know how to measure that or to prove that. It's just a feeling. But you should trust your feelings, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's great. I think we're really active with volunteering. We've got a really big, like, amazing volunteer part of the organization, but you know, volunteering is a barrier for a lot of people. You know, in terms of time, in terms of people who have the luxury of doing it and be able to financially afford it as well. So try to find other ways to, you know, get people involved and make sure that it's not just a one-way street.
Yeah.
And it's something that we're really trying to figure out. So last one little thing, how did you engage with people in terms of, you know, how did you find people in the first place? Do you use social media? In what platforms do you use and why? Did you do, you know, was it physical mail outs? Did you go out and post them? Did you do pop-ups in the street, or what sort of mode did you use to find those people and speak to them?
So we used Greater Sports, which is one of the partners or the like major partners, kind of mailing list system. People who were a bit interested in the project would be emailed about the walkabouts that we were having. We went to we emailed some kind of community venues and places like that, but then we also physically went into the spaces to meet people. They then suggested other places that we might want to go to where people would be interested. We had posters that we put physically around. There's like a local post office which still has, you know, the what's going on, where people can put like rent and then just lost cat and things like that. Notice boards, we utilize them. Tesco has a notice board that we used as well, like just different kind of notice boards. We try to go into some housing places as well to like leave them at the desk, and to colleges. We went into places and would ask before putting stuff up, and everyone was like really lovely and
Yeah.
that. But yeah, mostly when you're word of mouth as well. Some people came because like they'd heard about it, or someone mentioned, oh, there's something going on. But another thing would be to maybe like kind of respectfully piggyback off of other people's events. So if there is already like a gardening club or something that's related to what you want to find out, getting in contact with those people, or when they're doing it, like looking around, be like, oh, you're interested in this, you might be interested in what we're doing, kind of thing. But a mix between the social media and like physically being in places, because again, when they see you or they've seen you multiple times when you're not doing the activity that you want to do, they're probably more likely to take part because it's just interested, like, oh yeah, we've seen you here a couple of times, what do you actually do? Okay, I'll come round, like I'll come to your
And do
thing.
you use like specific social media platforms, and do you try to engage with different demographics on different platforms?
We messaged like Facebook groups and to see if they could post like the poster in there as well. That was a good shout. And then things would like be tweeted off like work Twitters. Yeah, am I missing anything out?
Our website, I guess.
Right. Okay, that's me. That's my list. Thanks.
Okay. We are almost out of time, but I would like to throw one question at you just for my personal satisfaction. And it is there anywhere else that you can see this methodology working and being useful other than the things we've discussed so far? And it's okay if you don't, but if you do, feel free to shout it out.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, with housing, there's a bit of legislative change happening at the moment within social housing. There's a new bill just been and coming to Parliament around oh God, what they call TSMs, tenant satisfaction measures, and it's about people basically engaging with the landlords, and that's actually a challenge for a lot of people. So just a couple of things that have come through from today in terms of just trying to, again, I guess it does come back to trust, and just I like the idea of just being there and eventually they get used to seeing your face, and eventually they may get around to trusting you. I think that's a really good point.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Is there something in the chat?
Michael saying that he needs to drop out. But
Sorry.
thank you for joining. I don't know if
I think this
they're gone already.
This
But
all really resonates with the way that we're trying to plan our next phase of project. So it's really reassuring to hear a lot of what we're thinking about coming back to us. You know, it's like our lowest common denominator almost. Like if it's safe for the most vulnerable people in society, then it's safe for everybody, whether that's, you know, we do walking now, we're looking at walking more than cycling. But you know, if it's safe for young girls, then it's safe for, you know, big muscly fellas who do jiu-jitsu or whatever, you know. And it's the same sort of thing with us. You can't really argue with like making a place walkable or making a place safe for women. And that's a, you know, it's a really, really nice way of looking at it. So I think we're going to have a big look into the tools that you're using and see where we can bring some of that into our project design for our next phase. Definitely.
That sounds fab. Feel free to email if you have any other questions. I just want to ping pong ideas.
Yeah, just to jump in here really, really quickly. Yeah, I mean, some of this methodology came out of previous projects that Open Data Manchester have done. So like we did a big project in Stockport pre-lockdown, you know, which was like looking at the area from the lived perspective of people with mobility impairments, so wheelchair users, people with other, people with visual impairments, that sort of thing. And in my research for that and in the project, it's exactly that, Paul. You know, like you find particularly there's some cities in Europe, like I think in Belgium and Amsterdam, who have made their whole city centres fully accessible, you know, and what you find is you make it accessible to the person in the wheelchair. It's also a much more pleasant experience for the able-bodied person. So there's so much evidence to that. So yeah, really, really, really interested to hear. I'd be very happy to talk a bit more about those sort of projects we've done as well. If you're interested, as Toybat and Pliska say, drop us an email.
okay. I'm gonna invite any final thoughts or reflection, and then I'll talk a little bit about the next session. No final thoughts? That's okay. The next session will be next week at the same time. So it'll be Friday the 11th, and the presentation will be led by Publica, that Toybat mentioned had done the animation for our personas. So Ellie will be speaking, and she'll share some key insights about the built environment and the games that they've developed for the project, so that the discussion can be done in different ways for different people. Okay, that I think concludes our session. I'm so glad we're on time, so everyone will be able to do the things that they're doing next on time without having to wait. Thank you everyone for joining. It's been really nice having you and having a bit of a discussion and answering questions. And also thank you to Toybat, because it was a really good presentation and answered questions very thoroughly as well. So yeah, thank you everybody.
Thanks everyone, that was really useful.
Thank you both.
Thanks,
That was great.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
We did it.
Excellent. That was great, guys. That was really good. Really
I've stopped
like.
recording.
Sorry.
Hey, where will the
Oh,
recording?
stop recording.
Did you record to the cloud?
Mhm.